Hello and welcome to this Edexcel GCSE Geography topic overview. These are a series of short reviews of just key information. They are not everything that you need, but it should just help to guide your learning and your revision. But please do have a look over your class notes, any revision guides and your own revision notes and other resources to make sure that you understand all of the major areas that we're going to be talking about. Then have a go at making your own version or even try making a video and let me see it. So first of all, we need to have a look at our specification. And you can see that for the UK's physical landscapes and overview, you can see it's very, very short. So just looking at geology within the UK and the physical and human factors that work together. So what I've done is put it all together in a little mind map that looks like this, and we're going to break down each little section as we go along. So starting at the geology of the UK. Now first of all, we need to understand that there are varying rock types within the UK. There are the three main types of sedimentary, igneous and metamorphic. And it's really important that you understand some of the names or the types of those rocks and also some of the key features within them and how they're formed and also where you might find them within the UK. So for sedimentary, these are rocks which are formed by compression, oceans and lakes compressing small grains and particles together, and these form rocks such as limestone, chalk, sandstone, and these will often have layers in them. They may contain fossils of plants and animals, and they might be easier to erode as well, and when you hold them you can actually feel they're quite grainy. Igneous rocks are those which have come from volcanic eruptions, and these tend to be granite or basalt, and these tend to be very hard. They're very resistant to erosion. Some of them may have crystals in, some of them may have bubbles in, depending whether they were formed above or below the land. And examples of this in the UK are Snowdonia. And then we have metamorphic rocks. Now these are rocks which were originally sedimentary or igneous, but under great heat and pressure from tectonic processes have turned it into other rocks. Very much like if you get a snowball and you keep compressing it and compressing it, it gets harder and harder and harder. Now the main types that we have in the UK are things like the schists and the slate. And the main features of these is that they can be seen either in thin layers. They can sometimes have fossils which may have changed though, and these also can be quite resistant, but sometimes they can break according to their layers. And you will find these in areas like the Cairngorms in Scotland, or also Dartmoor. No. Now, can you spot the obvious mistake that I've just made? And this is really important when you're making revision notes, that you do link them in correctly. Because I mentioned that Dartmoor and Cairngorms were examples of metamorphic rock, but actually these are examples of igneous rock. So metamorphic rock, we might see the slates, and we can find these in parts of the Lake District or places like the Cornish coast and the Pembrokeshire coast as well. So also always be very careful to check your revision notes to make sure you've not made any mistakes. Now also what we need to understand are the features and locations of three specific types of rock. So we look at upland landscapes. Now these are very hard wearing and they tend to be made of granite, so as we've discussed, Cairngorms and Dartmoor. And because the rock is so hard, it's been very difficult to erode it to lower levels. So it's often found in very mountainous and highland areas. Because of things like the glacial erosion, these has often led to very thin soils, and because it's quite hard, quite high up, it's got quite a harsh climate. Now this means that there will be very little human action there other than a bit of recreation. We also then have limestone landscapes. Now these tend to be found in areas like the Pennines, running up from the north of Derbyshire up into Yorkshire and possibly parts of the Lake District. Now these limestones are a sedimentary rock, but they are slightly more resistant than other types of sedimentary rock. So they're still forming land anywhere between sort of 6 and 800 meters above sea level. Now these were the landscapes that we see were formed by glaciers and also by river and by solution erosion, because limestone reacts to water and can be eroded. And you will often get steep valleys and disappearing rivers as it goes into the underground caverns. But also the key feature of it are limestone pavements on the top of flat plateaus. And you'll get these very boulder-like sections with clints and grikes. So these are big boulders with big cracks in between them, which have been eroded by solution. The final type of landscape is chalk and clay. These are often found particularly in the southeast, where the chalk is more resistant to erosion than the clay. So we tend to find chalk hills and clay valleys. Now the key features of these is they often have one scarp, very steep slope, and then one more gently sloping side. With regards to the land use, there tends to be maybe sheep grazing on the pastures on the dip slopes, and then crops on the clay. And you may also notice that you get springs appearing in the clay, so water springs in there. With regards to the human actions, what we tend to find is that the higher land and the steeper land may be used for recreation and forestry because it's too difficult to build on and the climate isn't very agreeable. As we start to get to the lower and steeper land, again we get recreation, but we might start to see some element of sheep farming as well as forestry there. Now on the lower and flatter lands, this is where we see most human interaction. And this may be agriculture in the form of crops or grazing cattle. We start to see towns and villages and settlements on there, and we also see a lot of our major transport routes built on this flatter land because it's much easier to build on. Now, just to help you, if you do need any more information, you can pause it here and you can see greater detail of those different types of geological landscapes within the UK, and you should have this in your notes as well. And again, here we have some information with maps of the locations, some of the examples of what the landscapes look like. So here we have a scarp slope, the clay valleys leading to the dip slope here. Here we can see a tor on a granite landscape, and here we can see the limestone and the limestone pavement here. And then we have all of the key features. So hopefully, all in all, this should help you with your revision to understand the key points of the specification. And again, as I've said, make sure you're looking through your notes, your revision guide, and the revision websites to help with your understanding. One other thing that is worth looking at as well is familiarising yourself with the key features on maps, because you will be expected to use maps within the exam. So remember that you've got the grid lines here, the numbers along the bottom are the eastings, you read those first, and then the numbers along the side are the northings, and they give you the second. Please have a look on the YouTube channel for lots of information on how to use maps effectively. But have a quick look. What do you think each of these landscapes show you? Think of the information we've had. What evidence can you find on this map here to suggest what kind of landscape it is? Well, if you look at it, we can see we've got these steep lines shown by the contours and close contours together. We can see we've got these streams which disappear and these potholes where the rivers disappear into. We can also see we get these areas which are fairly flat of rock. So these would demonstrate the limestone pavements. So this would be a limestone landscape. Here we can see we've got a very steep slope. We have a more gently sloping side, and we can see how these contours bend round, and this would suggest that these were river valleys, but these have all dried up. We can see up here we've got footpaths and a bit of forestry. But when we look lower down, we can see we've got the transport and we've got farming and settlement down here. So this would suggest this would be well, you have a guess. And then finally on this one, if we look, we can see the altitude. We're looking at around 500, 600 meters, so quite high land here. We can see lots of contours close together, so quite steep, but we've got these rocky outcrops, and if we look, we can see that some of them are called tors. We can see we've got a nature reserve and a few footpaths, but other than that, very few man-made features. So what kind of landscape do you think that is? So let's see if you've guessed right. So this one here, this would be a chalk and clay landscape, the chalk being the highland, the scarp slope leading down to the clay. And notice how these streams kind of appear at the base of the chalk. This would be the granite landscape with the tors, the highland and the steep slopes. So I hope you found that useful. Thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you'll watch some of the other in this series. Take care. Bye.